Hello, my name is John Reynolds and welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. On this episode, I'm talking with Don Cochrane. Don is the CEO of Vertex Watches, a brand that started in 1912 by his grandfather. Don has worked with some incredible brands from Ferrari and Tesla and Formula One, so clearly we're going to get on very well. So let's get into it. Tell me, who is Don Cochrane?
Right now, I'm the boss of the Vertex Watch Company, British Heritage Watch Company. I've done many things to get here. I've been very born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, very brand focused, I guess, as most people were in the 80s when brands sort of came alive. My early career was working in advertising for WWII, which is a big brand. I mean, WWII created the word brand.
Yeah.
From there, I worked in Formula One, which is obviously another big brand. Ferrari, Bentley, Tesla was second hire for Tesla in Europe. And then Aston Martin, private aviation, and now watches. So a bunch of stuff brought me here, but it's always been about, selling a brand and that sort of thing.
Some cool brands there. It's really cool brands.
It's been fun.
I grew up in the 70s. Well, I grew up ultimately in the 80s, born in the 70s.
Yeah.
But you're right, the importance of brand just became so relevant. What were your early influences and kind of who and what influenced you to go into that route?
Yeah, I mean, I think I found advertising very romantic in a way because I love films, I love media. Adverts at the time were really little films. I mean, it was they were, some of the greatest directors now were advertising directors then, and they really were pushing the boundaries of what could be done and that sort of thing. So it was really kind of exciting, and film at the same time was kind of coming alive, and it was so vivid. I was a massive John Hughes fan growing up, and he's quite advertising the way he does stuff. So that brought me to advertising, and then I was very lucky at WWII. It was the time when you had these big agencies, and my first accounts were Guinness, IBM, Bupa, Ford. You got to work on Shell, and some amazing stuff. We did some amazing Ferrari Schumacher ads for Shell and stuff, and that was quite fun.
It's storytelling, right? And it's imagination.
Absolutely.
And as a youngster and as an adult, there's been there's a Shell advert, correct if I'm wrong, I think the Shell advert that goes through the ages of the Formula One car.
Yeah. I was there for that.
I was just going to ask you if you were.
Great, yeah.
Because the exhaust note, and as a motorsport fan, that was incredible, let alone the visionary side of things.
Absolutely. And it's romantic, and I'm a romantic, so that works really well.
That's a ditto. So you could argue you followed your passion. It's a big thing for me. It's like two daughters growing up, inspiring them to show an interest in something and then follow their passion to do that. So you really adhered to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. I've generally always found a way to do what I love or be part of what I love, which is fantastic. Cars have always been a big passion of mine. Very, early on. I mean, and it's a passion for many boys, definitely for me.
Posters on the wall.
At boarding school. Any magazine with a Lamborghini Countach in it, I bought it and cut it down and put it on my wall. Still haven't got to having a Countach, but I will one day.
Manifesting.
but that love and that passion, luckily through that I've had the opportunity to be part of some amazing automotive experience.
Yes.
Which is good.
And interestingly, the very first thing you said, founder of a watch brand.
Yeah.
Watches and cars and motorsports seem to go hand in hand. Rolex, 24 Hours of Le Mans.
Oh, for sure.
Tag with McLaren. It's just, did that sort of natural progression of what you really are doing now, kind of, was there influence through all of that kind of journey of motorsport?
I think the important thing, all my previous history did when it came to restarting Vertex, was it had given me the tools I needed to do it, and it gave me the confidence to do it. So a little bit about why Vertex started. It was about 8.5 years ago now. My grandmother died. She was 99.5. We were incredibly close. I was sitting at work very sad about it, and it was almost like an epiphany. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to bring her father's watch company back as a way to keep her in my life? And at first I thought I'd just make one watch and then Vertex would exist again. And then it sort of bloomed from there into what is quite a big watch company now. But at that point, I knew I had the tools to do it from what I'd done before. I knew I could tell the story. And the nice thing about Vertex is it's got an incredible story, which is what we've been able to do.
Can you elaborate? Because I think this goes hand in hand with the importance of storytelling.
Yeah.
If we were reminiscing about a racing driver and a certain thing that happened in a certain race and so on, and then the whole thing with the Vertex story that you've reinvigorated, is incredible.
Yeah, well, I mean, the story is important because it gives Vertex authority in the marketplace. It gives us a reason to exist, and that's really important for me because I don't want us to be pretending. We're not about pretending.
It's heritage as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vertex started in 1912. My great-grandfather started it. Was part of the First World War, military watches, made a lot of civilian watches, and then most famously, it was one of the 12 manufacturers that supplied the British during the Second World War. And the other 12 were people like Omega, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Longines, IWC, some really big brands. So when I was retelling that story, it was very easy to kind of create this aura of expertise around Vertex. And we were the only British member of the Dirty Dozen. And because of that, we could tell the story in a very unique way. That the Swiss are brilliant, but they have to be careful about how they talk about the Second World War. We can be quite we were on the beaches and we did all this stuff, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, I get that. And so I think that is interesting to me because I love my history. I was really close to my grandma. She died in 98. It's a really interesting parallel. And there are certain things I do that keep her close to me in my life, but there was no watch brand in the mix. But knowing our history and the importance of heritage, I imagine you've learned a lot and are still learning a lot from diving into the history of Vertex and everything around it. Tell me more about that.
I mean, that's wonderful. It's also hugely frustrating. Had I started it while she was still alive, or my grandfather was still alive, I would have had all these answers straight away. And now I'm constantly going through archives. We're digging through historical records. We're looking at stuff. It's over 80 years ago. D-Day happened. That's a long time when records aren't maintained and stuff. There were a lot of the records were lost in the 1976. I think it was the Royal Signals Corps actually had a fire which burned all the records regarding watches during the Second World War, which is very frustrating. So we sort of piece things together from first-person testimony, and there's fewer of those people available anymore. And then just digging through archives and stuff. And we're very lucky to be working very closely with some amazing historians for that.
So you're learning loads. And I think the other thing as well is that flips me to the kind of thinking about the demographic of buyer. So I'm interested in storytelling and history. And I think whether you're a certain age, you're showing interest in that, it may not be as a youngster.
Yeah.
Dare I say Americans in particular?
So America.
So I'm just interested who's the buyer for the
America's at 67% of our market, so it's a massive part of our market, and the Americans really do cherish that history, that part of their history.
Yeah.
So that's great. The next biggest market is the UK for us, which is obviously great. And I think as you do get older, you do yearn more to know, how did I get here? Who were my grandparents? What did they do? And that sort of thing, or great grandparents necessarily. And they did do remarkable things. It was a remarkable time. In America, they call it the greatest generation. Those people that actually served and went out there and fought for the freedoms that we sort of take for granted somewhat today. And it's amazing, and it's real, and it's vivid. And I think that's really important.
Totally. So with your almost cross-fertilizing your interests, so you've got Vertex now was a passion project to come kind of proper business.
Yeah.
And then you've got that passion for motorsport and cars.
Yeah.
So a Vertex Ferrari watch, then you can kind of have a conversation.
Well, so annoyingly, Ferrari working with Jamil, and that they've got a little bit more marketing budget than we do at the moment. Sadly, not for long. Give me a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we sponsor Caterham car company, so their road series in the UK, we sponsor that, and we get involved with a bit of the historic stuff. Which is nice, and we've got a great relationship with people like Goodwood and stuff, which is super fun too.
Yeah.
But my life also still involves a little bit of work outside of Vertex, and that does take me a bit closer to Formula One still, so that's quite fun.
Tell me more about that.
So before I started Vertex, I was president of a private jet company called VistaJet, which is an amazing company that I'm still very fond of today. And although I kind of left it to do Vertex Archer because Vertex took over my life a bit, I'm now sort of being dragged back a bit. Now that I've got more people working with Vertex, I can spend more time with VistaJet. One of the things VistaJet does is we sponsor Ferrari. So we sponsor the F1 stuff, we sponsor the Clienti Challenge Cup and that sort of thing, and now World Endurance Car. So we have our own World Endurance Car team. So I get to do a lot of playing around that stuff.
That's awesome.
It's not bad.
And I'm a fan, so I see it from, either watching on the TV or been to races. And I've been to kind of, I guess you call it the corporate hospitality a few times, but as someone that's worked in that environment, is the glam still the same inside, or is it kind of hard work and people stress?
It's really interesting. I mean, it's absolutely. I mean, a motor race can be just sitting in a cold car park. It can be very unglamorous, but can obviously be very glamorous parts of it too. And that people are getting better and better at doing hospitality. Funnily enough, when I worked in Formula One, I wasn't allowed to do any hospitality because I worked for ecclestone and we couldn't show any favours, so we couldn't actually go and get a coffee from Ferrari or ice cream. They had an ice cream machine at the time, which was rather cool. But we couldn't do that because they wanted to see, why are you talking to them or that sort of thing. So that was a bit boring. Whereas
biasness or bright
now at
or
least
whatever.
I can play with people, which is more fun. And I still really like it. I really like being part of it. It's really fun.
That's what I was aiming at, because it's like some people have a passion for something, and then when they immerse themselves and work in that environment, they can lose that.
When I left F1, it was a bit like I didn't want to watch it because it was kind of like seeing an ex-girlfriend. It was a bit uncomfortable, but now I'm fine. It's very different, and it's F1's gone through an incredible transformation. I know maybe it's not as fun to watch right now with the dominance of Red Bull, but it's still really interesting and great characters, and I'm very lucky to get quite close to them, which is quite fun.
Don't want to get too sidetracked, but Drive to Survive, the whole thing, we've grown up through the whole history of it being a sport.
Yeah.
It was a bit more like a show now.
Yeah,
but then of course, someone, I think Mark Blundell, who was sitting where you are now a few weeks ago, was like, but it hasn't done Formula One any harm, has it?
No, it really hasn't, and it's brought a lot more eyeballs to it. And that's a good thing. I mean, all sports need money, and money comes from people watching it. So that's super helpful.
I want to talk about you. Ultimately, sitting here, you're an entrepreneur. You've taken Vertex from a dormant name to a fast-growing brand now. What's the journey been like for you?
It's been really, really interesting. I mean, I think the first thing that I think it's worth pointing out is that, everyone suffers from imposter syndrome, as do I. The only way I could do this was being incredibly blinkered about it. So I decided what I was going to do. I decided the size of the watch. I decided kind of the story that watch is going to have. And then I didn't look at any watch media, any watch forums, or any of I'm just doing this. I'm doing this thing. Because you don't want anyone to deter you. Oh, are you sure you want to do it like that? You can use that strap. Is that the right buckle size? And all those questions I just don't have room for. So I became quite blinkered, and I'm still relatively blinkered. I don't really enjoy reading watch magazines. I don't really like going to watch shows and see what other people are doing. It's much more important that Vertex does its thing.
Yeah.
So that's been good. But the thing itself has been amazing. And going back to bringing me closer to my grandparents, there have been moments where I've been walking down a road with a little box of watches to go to a meeting with a journalist or something. And I know that my grandfather would have walked down the same road with a box of watches to meet someone to talk about it. And that's a real kind of, it's a real moment. I love that.
And I think a lot of kind of talk in the entrepreneur side of things and business side of things is almost like that kind of, particularly with the glam of Formula One and VistaJet, is the kind of insta, and yet business is hard.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know your relationship with things that perhaps haven't gone right, haven't gone the way you wanted, and whether you've learned from that, and actually potentially that's given you an avenue that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't tried and failed, and then that's worked for you.
I mean, we structured the company very simply, but in a rather sophisticated way. So we work with some great manufacturing partners in Switzerland who take care of a lot of things at a very high level. It means that our watches cost us a lot to manufacture, but the quality levels are very high. So that's really important to me. But that means that the watches are guaranteed at that point, that they're serviced at that point, that sort of thing, which helps protect Vertex from someone who had potentially bought their own dials, their own hands, their own movements, their own cases, and then putting them together. So we simplify things in a way by working with a very sophisticated manufacturing partner, which is great, which helps us from making too many mistakes. There are obviously little things you do. There's a lot of learning. I mean, there's a lot of learning about how to tell the story. I
was thinking that marketing.
Yeah, we grew up in a time when if you had a review in a magazine, that was like, oh, you must be doing really well. You're in this great magazine. They say you're the best watch in the world. That's great. And you get that review and you think, well, tomorrow the phone will be ringing off the hook and we'll sell 1 million watches, and no one calls. But you get a YouTuber who's got 200 followers going, I love this watch, and suddenly you sell 15 watches. And it's really interesting how that's learning has come about for me, understanding how that works.
And with your, dare I say, potential connections with the career you've had and got, and that power of influences, I'm seeing this in other businesses I'm involved in where, if you had Ed Sheeran talking about something in the mental health space that then points it in the direction of loads of people will go.
Yeah.
What about some of the people in motorsport, all that fraternity
Yeah,
and wearing
I
a
mean,
Vertex watch? Is that on the cards?
I mean, there's the other thing. We do a little bit of that. We haven't done any paid influencers yet. We're very lucky that I've got some. I mean, you know, when you get to a certain age, you've worked with a lot of people, and the people that you started out on the same desk with are now running companies or that sort of thing. So it's really, really nice to be able to get into a room relatively easily and have a conversation really easily. Also, obviously, doing things like Tesla, it made me very visible to a lot of journalists. And so when it came to doing Vertex, it was very easy for anyone to go, oh, I'm doing this thing now. Do you want to have a chat about it? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, we'll have a chat. So that was really helpful.
Power of influences. I think yes. It's like, what I like is you're growing it organically.
Yeah.
So you just said it. You're not paying. Bad example. Potentially Sebastian Vettel. He's not racing anymore. I just picked him, but he's out there as someone that if he was photographed and he's kind of.
Yeah, I don't know.
You haven't gone
much,
that route.
Yeah, I just don't know how much influences have. That's my concern. So we've been very lucky to have a few people wear our watches, who have, millions of followers on Instagram, for instance, 3 or 4 or 5 million, and they post a picture and you're like, oh yeah, this is going to do great things as well, and you don't see. I'd settle for another 1,000 Instagram followers, but you don't even see that, and so that concerns me slightly. That finding the right point for that influence is complicated. Now we work a lot with military personnel, and for us that's a very important. I wouldn't call them influencers, but they're real and we're real, and that's very important. So that's the more important part of our business, I think, than maybe chasing Sebastian Vettel.
What I like about that is the association. So the amount of people that are associated from a family and friends and from an aspirational stroke respect, i.e. heroes. If people know that's a brand that is, dare I say, sort of associated in supporting veterans and soldiers, that's actually cool marketing in itself.
Yeah.
Let alone then the storytelling that goes back to 1912.
But again, for us, it's about being real. It's about having integrity, and that's really important. I think, the brand itself reflects the 1920s to 1940s Britishness, which was kind of integrity and behaving well and being proud of who you are and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's again a more romantic time potentially, but it's very important for us to have that same integrity now. So if you come to our little boutique in Shepherd Market in Mayfair, it's very kind of old fashioned, and I kind of like that, but not in a pastiche kind of way. It feels nice. It feels good.
Oh, I like that. We've got a question that's more personal to you, actually. Just touching on the fact that you're an entrepreneur, you're in business, and you had a career that's in that sort of beautiful surroundings, everything's Formula One and jets and so on. How have you prioritised your own mental and physical health? Keeping fit, you're surrounded by these guys that are in ice baths for 4 minutes at a time and so on. How important is it to you to keep fit? What do you do? What works for you?
Yeah, well, I kind of joke that I've got the same fitness level as a chemo patient. I really don't do any of that stuff. I get bored very quickly, so I don't have time. I don't get into going to the gym. I don't get into spinning and all that sort of thing. I do some press ups every other day, and that comes from starting to do the Cresta run about 4 years ago with some friends. You just need a bit of upper body strength to control the sled. But that's really what I do. I try not to drink too much, try to eat relatively healthily, but I like food and I like drinking, so it's hard.
Well, it's a key part of, I imagine with the work that you do, the corporate entertaining and so on, it's a part of what you have to do.
For sure,
right?
Absolutely. And it's something I love. It's part of the reason I do it, so that's good.
What about mental health? It goes hand in hand with doing press-ups and keeping fit and enjoying what you do, which is very clear. I can see that in context of when you talk about it. But, a man-to-man talking to each other, we might admit that we've pulled a hamstring or done something when you were with a personal trainer, but we may not have that conversation very openly about the fact that we're struggling with, our finances or our work or family. And even more than that, actually having help with that. What's been your journey with mental health?
Sometimes it's hard when things are going in the right direction and you're feeling like you're the one making every decision, because I am the one making every decision. In the end, it's all about what I decide. Yeah. And that's a lot of pressure for a person. But at the same time, the social side of my work really helps. I do talk to people all the time. I am out to lunch 3 or 4 times a week or at dinners, and we talk. And talking is really important to me. I'm not insular. I'm very social. And so that's my therapy. I mean, that's how I remain calm. And when I'm not feeling great, people remind you that you're doing okay, and that's enough. Or sometimes they just distract you with a different thing, and I get to disappear off and do something crazy, and then come back and I'm refreshed.
Yeah, there must be a lot of travelling involved in what you do, and actually, but what you said in terms of that connection, it's a key part of longevity. Actually, I learned this through Jim Melanie, who again I've interviewed, who's the biggest investor I think in longevity, and he said that people when they retire and then cut themselves off from colleagues or from that every day, they might have had a sociable role. Yeah. That's actually when they effectively age. Yeah. And potentially then the brain shuts down. So actually this whole human connection, we need it. We thrive off it.
No, for sure. It's the most important thing in my life is being social, being in the world.
Yeah, I get that. And flipping that back actually to Vertex, you were really quite smart with the marketing. I don't think you do it anymore, but when you first started, you used that power of connection and almost invitation only.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was done for a number of reasons, and it had a number of different effects. So when Vertex first started, I was kind of a little bit sick of conspicuous consumerism, the idea that I'm good because I have this thing because I paid for it. That I wanted it to be not about the money. I wanted it to be more about belonging to something. I mean, you buy a brand to belong to a thing, or you become part of a brand to belong to a thing. So at the beginning, 60 people were invited to buy a watch, and then they could invite people from then on. And then we changed it to also any serving or ex-military personnel could then apply for a watch as well. We built the brand around that sort of structure. And it was really great. The interesting thing, it worked really well in the UK, but in America, it didn't work very well. Because in America, they see money as a democratizer. They feel like I have money, therefore I can do whatever I want. Yeah. And so they got quite angry with Vertex for saying, well, I want one, I can't have one. So we had to change things a little bit. And now we don't do that so much. We only do it on specific military models. But it was an interesting way to start. And I'm kind of pleased I tried it. It was good to have a go.
And in context of growing the brand far and wide, do you plan to do that? Do you plan to bring in different models and ranges that grow?
Yeah, I mean, within the organic framework that we have at the moment, I mean, it's expensive to make watches. You spend a lot of money buying the parts and building the things, and it takes a long time to realize that. So it's an expensive thing to do, but there's things I want to do. So we made a monopusher, which is a single button chronograph because I love monopushers. We made a dive watch because I love diving, and that's great because I wanted to be the best dive watch it can be, and it is, and I love that too. There's still a couple of things on the list of things I like. There's a GMT world timer. We probably need to do that. And then we're launching a 36mm, which is the same size as the original watch that we made for D-Day this year. So that'll be fun too.
That is cool. We touched on the challenges of kind of ultimately what could be failures and challenges. Flipping that to the fact that you've successfully revitalised Vertex and been successful in your career, if you like. Sitting here now, how would you define success?
I mean, success for Vertex was basically bringing it back to the world. If you'd Googled Vertex when I first came up with the idea, there's maybe 2 or 3 articles about Vertex you would have found. Now there is pages and pages and pages and pages, and we've been in every magazine and paper in the world, and so that job's done. Tick, that's done. That's success in that place. It's the name of my great grandfather's back out there, and the name of my grandfather's out there. That will now never go away. So that was successful. Finding success or defining success in the longer term is very difficult because it's you're never happy with what you've succeeded because you're always looking to get to the next bit.
I like
aspiration paradox.
It's about the journey. Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with the question because I find that really interesting. But because you're in business, we're both in business, and then there's everything that goes with life. Yeah. Really, what I was asking you is you could have told me, I said, I want Vertex to be on the, want to be sponsoring the 24 hours or something. It's not, you haven't got one set.
No, and to me, I mean, life mission is 2 life rules is like you're only allowed to see the world, and it's about moments, not money. So, that's what I cherish the moments I get to do, the things I get to see, the people I get to meet. And Vertex has helped me do that. VistaJet helps me do that. Everything I've done has helped me achieve that. And I know that a 12-year-old Don, if he could see me now, would be blown away with what I've been able to do. And that's really lovely.
That's cool. And actually flipping that back to perhaps not 12-year-old, but kind of coming into late teens, a youngster coming through aspirations to have a career that could be VistaJet or Formula One and Ferrari, Aston Martin, Tesla. What advice would you give them?
I mean, really believe that you can do it. I mean, the best thing you can, when you meet anyone, when you interview anyone, is if they believe in themselves. It's the sexiest thing in the world. And, you know, it is possible. I mean, it's as possible now as there's ever been. If anything, it's more. There's more people working in the industry. The industry is growing all the time. There's more options. It's more visible to see routes into it. It used to be quite opaque, and now you can, you know,
peel back the layers a bit. Yeah,
for sure.
And with those names I just mentioned, some of them are amazing. You must have some quite cool stories, some quite cool memories. What stands out? And I know I'm being potentially vague, but there's one thing stand out: being part of Ferrari, being part of.
I mean, a month and a half ago, I was at an event for the launch of our World Endurance Car team in Milan, and Carlos and Charles Clark were there, and we had to go to a restaurant which is about 45 minutes away, and Carlos and me jumped in the car together, and I got to hear his story from him on the way there, and that was just, and he just, you know, gone through the contract negotiations this year, and some other stuff was happening. It was just really nice to be in that moment, and it's those moments I love. I've also, you know, done things with Vertex where within the first year of Vertex there was a thing called Salon QP at Saatchi Gallery in London, and there was one hall which was curated by the people that had created the Salon QP watch show, and in that hall was Panerai, IWC, I think Bremont, and us. That's 9 months after we relaunched the brand, and it was amazing that Vertex not only could be in that room, but was in that room, and that people, no one was going, well, why are they there? And we were like, oh, that's so cool. And that was an amazing moment. So those little things are great.
That's cool. That's really personal as well, because Charles and Carlos is like kind of a cool moment in time, and you know, we see them on the TV. You're having a personal chat, but Vertex in the company of
for sure
those brands that's really cool.
It's amazing, and you know, being on the front of, I think it was the Telegraph Time, and it was us and Panerai and Patek and IWC and blah blah blah, and that's amazing that we can sit next to those brands and people accept it, and that's fantastic. Yeah,
but there's a bit of juggling here. You know, I know you're a dad. You mentioned that having got Vertex set up and feels like it's not only established, but you could ultimately go and do more stuff with a passion with VistaJet. How do you juggle?
It's not necessarily easy. I've got a great team at Vertex now. Hugo, Robin, Rob, Julia, they're all fantastic, and they do brilliant things.
Which has allowed you to spend less time.
And that's exciting. And it's exciting to build a company when you get to that point and you realize I don't have to be there all the time.
It's a skill as well, by the way. Especially as a founder. People just stay on and don't delegate,
and that's good. And I like to think they all have a bit of ownership too, which is great. So that's been exciting, and it does allow me to free things up a bit, but it's not easy balancing. And you know, you never stop working. I never stop working.
No. Well, I'll be asking, if you sold it, I'll be asking you that. Tell me how to do it, because it's a constant thing. If you're trying to spin some rights, it's
and it's all about momentum with brands. It's all about, you know, the minute they stop talking about you, then it's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
So maintaining momentum, maintaining that story, planning product cycles 3, 4, 5 years ahead, planning press cycles a year ahead, and that sort of thing, and marketing activity a year ahead. There's a lot going on all the time.
Yes.
And so you're not living in the moments a lot of the time. You're already planning well ahead, and that can be a little bit frustrating. So occasionally, I'm not very good at it, but occasionally I like to just kind of sit down and just reflect on where we're at, and that's important.
That's almost part of the mental health question as well. So there's been a amount of people that don't, and I can be guilty of it, don't stop, because sometimes that can be your best work.
Yeah.
Because you can suddenly see the wood from the trees, you know, you suddenly get perspective. Whereas when you're running at 1,000 miles an hour, trying to do all the things you're doing, you can get a bit swamped.
No, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you've made time to speak with me today. I was looking forward to it.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
All the things we talked about are really interesting to me. So thank you, Don.
Right.
Appreciate you talking.
Cool.
Cheers.